Mr. Sergeant at Arms, invite the members into the chamber and close the doors. I hereby declare the House of Representatives of the 112th General Assembly of the State of Tennessee now in session. Would the members please stand? Would the visitors in the gallery please stand and remain standing through the Pledge of Allegiance? Leader Lambert will serve as chaplain of the day. Leader Lambert.
Thank you, Probably better if we turn this thing on. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, members. As I tried to prepare for this morning, I don't know about you guys, but I'll keep in my phone certain scriptures and quotes that just as I read them, either in a daily devotional or someone shares with me, will strike me. And I was thinking about what to share today. And this is really at the top of the list, and it's a quote I read on a regular basis from Matthew 22:37 through 39. Many of y'all know what this is already, but it says, Jesus replied, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself." That was happening within a debate in which there were some of the best orators and wise individuals of the time that were trying to trick our Lord into giving some different answer. And a lot of that happened in the Bible, and we do a lot of that here on the floor. And throughout, it should always strike all of us that throughout the Word of God and throughout Jesus' life here on this planet, he always responded with love. I mean, every single time, no matter how bad somebody hated him, no matter what they said, no matter what kind of little verbal trick they tried, he responded with love. I wish I could say I do that daily in my life. But every now and again, something happens, and I get mad about something. I respond incorrectly, or I bite a friend. The tongue is a double-edged sword. I mean, it can cut deeper than any metal instrument out there ever. It can hurt worse than anything. And it can leave wounds that you can't see, but that stick around forever. And it causes rifts between friends. I love every one of y'all on this floor. And that's another thing that a good friend of mine taught me a couple of years ago. You know, ladies, us guys here, we don't say we love each other as often as we should. Society's kind of taught us we shouldn't say that. Our Lord taught us that we should share that. So every now and again over the past few months, some of y'all looked at me a little bit weird because I'll look at you and say, "Jeremy, I love you, man. Really appreciate you." And I've said that to many of y'all. Say that to each other. Do that for me because I love y'all. I love every one of y'all because God loves you and because what you are doing right here is serving every single member of your community and every single member of this state. I'll leave you with one other thought. I've watched over the past 9 years while I've been down here, and it seems like a long time and it seems like an instant, how social media has changed how we work. It's one of the most dangerous and ugliest things in our society right now, and it could be a phenomenal tool to spread love and to spread the Word of God and to spread even the good things we do down here. But unfortunately, where it becomes a venue for folks to be able to say the most hateful, nastiest thing to each other you can imagine. And then that goes viral because it's interesting. Hey, look at that zinger. Hey, look at what that person said. Hey, look at what that person did. Hey, let me point out where this person who's good 99.9% of their time stumbled and made a mistake. I promise you, we will all be there at some point. I've been there. You'll be there. But I say this from the podium today. I love you. I love each and every one of you. God loves you. Let's try to take from how our Lord envisioned this world and lived it out during the short time he had there, and hold me accountable as I will each of you, that when we get a little riled up and we get a little passionate and we get insistent that our way on something must be the way to go, let's take a second, love each other as we will today, and just move through that together, so that at the end of the day, we can respect one another and see each other as God's perfect creation in each one of us. That's just what was on my heart this morning. If you don't mind, if we could pray together. Dear Lord and Heavenly Father, thank you for allowing me the privilege of being a member of this august body. Thank you for each and every member in this room and for everyone that may be tuning in today. God, you love us in ways that we cannot even imagine. Lord, please allow us the privilege of being able to share that love with one another and to truly enjoy the short time that we have here to be able to make a difference. Lord, please just guide us, give us wisdom beyond our means, help us to be able to look to you in each and every decision so that your true and perfect will is done here and throughout all eternity. In Jesus' holy and sweet name we pray, amen.
Leader Lambert would lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Salute, pledge. Pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Speaker.
Mr. Clerk, please take the roll.
Roll call.
Mr. Clerk, please take the roll.
Mr. Speaker, 92 members present.
Let the journal reflect that Representatives Byrd, Carter, Potts, Cooper are excused. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Welcoming and honoring.
Welcome and honoring Representative Garrett.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today, I rise to honor Caitlin Prince. Caitlin has been Judge Carter's intern. I believe they're somewhere on my left. Caitlin, could you stand up? Where are you? Thank you very much. In Judge Carter's absence, she has helped my office. She's helped Chairman Curcio's office. She has been a delight. So thank you very much for your service as an intern during this special session. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to give honor to my oldest grandchild. My granddaughter, Nora Lambert of Germantown, Tennessee, is turning a whopping 8 years old today, going on 18. Thank you so much.
Anyone else seeking recognition under welcome and honoring? Chairman Dixie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today is two special people's birthday. Today is my middle brother, Jeffrey Dixie's birthday. He turns 55. He lives in Chattanooga. He's actually a constituent of Representative Mike Carter. And also, a person that protects us every day downstairs when we come through the tunnel, Angie Crawford, is her birthday as well at the THP. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Representative Weaver, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, I rise to stand to wish my mother and father, Tony and Lila Garish, a happy 64th wedding anniversary. It's not very often you get to recognize those many years, but I love my parents very much. They've shown me true commitment, and they've stuck with each other through thick and thin. So I'm grateful for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Calfee.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I talked with Joan Carter this morning, and she said the judge is really struggling and request your prayers. I talked with him last week, and he was extremely weak, so we need to be praying for the judge. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else seeking recognition? Seeing none. Next order, Mr. Clark.
Introduction of resolutions.
Leader Lambert, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move that all resolutions properly filed be introduced pursuant to Rule Number 17 and placed on the consent calendar or referred to the appropriate standing committee.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clark.
Senate Joint Resolutions congratulatory and memorializing.
Leader Lambert, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that all Senate Joint Resolutions congratulatory and memorializing line letter S be placed on the consent calendar pursuant to Rule Number 17.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clark.
Resolutions lying over.
Leader Lambert, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move that all resolutions lying over be referred to the appropriate standing committee.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Introduction of bills, Senate bills on first consideration, Senate bills on second consideration, House bills on second consideration, petitions and memorials, reports from standing committees, reports from select committees, calendars. Mr. Speaker, the House has a consent calendar.
Chairman Zachary, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of the consent calendar on third and final consideration in keeping with Rule 50.
Gentleman moves passage of the consent calendar, properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, any objections been filed?
Mr. Speaker, item 47, House Joint Resolution 490 has been objected to by Chairman Faison. Item 58, House Joint Resolution 501 has been objected to by Chairman Dixie.
Anyone seeking recognition on the consent calendar? Representative Garrett, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. After consultation with both leaders, I move that H.R. 499, that Chairman Mike Carter be the prime sponsor of that resolution.
Without objection, exclusion duly noted. Representative Beck.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just wanted to bring to the members' attention on the consent calendar. I have some very important Opry anniversaries for Steve Warner, Alan Jackson, Vince Gill, Randy Travis, the Gatlin brothers, Bill Anderson, and Bobby Osborne. If you'd like to be a co-sponsor, I would love to have you in their items 73 through 80, and I thank you.
Representative Parkinson at Leader Camper's desk.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That wasn't partisan, was it?
Nope.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Speaker, after consulting with both leaders, items numbers 67 through 72, please list the Shelby County members that vote in the affirmative as co-prime sponsors.
Without objection, exclusion is duly noted. So ordered. Anyone else seeking recognition on the consent calendar? I don't see anyone. We're voting on the consent calendar. All members in favor vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 91, no nays.
Having received the constitutional majority, I hereby declare the consent calendar passed. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is tabled. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, the House has a regular calendar.
Call the first bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 679 by Chairman Carr and others relative to voting under the influence. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Representative Lynn, for what purpose?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I realize that I'm out of order, but our trooper downstairs, Trooper Crawford, Angie Crawford, today is her birthday. Thank you.
Thank you. Out of order. Chairman Carr, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 246.
Chairman Carr moves to substitute and conform Senate Bill 246. Without objection, so ordered. Chairman Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 246 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Carr moves passage of Senate Bill 246 on third and final consideration. Properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, call the first amendment.
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Chairman Carr, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What this bill is, we call it the BUI bill, boating under the influence. It puts the same penalties on boating under the influence as you would have under driving under the influence to protect our boating people out there. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Chairman Carr renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 246 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member cast a vote? Does any member wish to change their vote? Lamberth, aye. Sherrill, aye. Russell, aye. Zachary, aye. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 91, no nays.
Senate Bill 246, having received the constitutional majority, I hereby declare it passed. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1365 by Representative Smith and others relative to local government entities that self-fund a plan of insurance. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Representative Smith, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 989.
Representative Smith moves to substitute and conform Senate Bill 989, properly seconded. Without objection, so ordered. Representative Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 989 on third and final consideration.
Representative Smith moves passage of Senate Bill 989 on third and final consideration. Properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, call the first amendment.
House Local Government Committee Amendment Number 1. Mr. Speaker, it's included in Senate Amendment Number 1.
Chairman Crawford, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
House Local Government Committee Amendment Number 2, Mr. Speaker, it's also included in the Senate Amendment Number 1.
Chairman Crawford, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 2 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Smith, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill, or Senate Bill 989 now is a bill that Chairman or Judge Mike Carter has worked on for over 2.5 years. This will address a local issue with local governments and school systems who are self-insured. It will allow them to have the same right of subrogation and right of reimbursement that exists for those that are otherwise insured under a third-party administrator to reclaim payment when it is otherwise made in an accident or an illness. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Representative Smith renews her motion. Any discussion on the bill? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 989 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member cast their vote? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 91, no nays.
Senate Bill 989 having received the constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 124 by Chairman Howell and others relative to transportation infrastructure. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Chairman Howell, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 137.
Chairman Howell moves to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 137, properly seconded. Without objection, so ordered. Chairman Howell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 137 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Howell moves passage of Senate Bill 137 on third and final consideration, properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, call the First Amendment.
House Transportation Committee Amendment Number 1.
Vice Chairman Hall, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We move to adopt.
Vice Chairman Hall moves adoption of House Amendment Number 1, properly seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of adopting House Amendment Number 1 say aye, aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Howell, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this is the annual transportation omnibus bill for the naming of, this year, 56 roads and bridges in Tennessee. With that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Chairman Howell renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 137 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member casts their vote, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 91, no nays.
Senate Bill 137 having received the constitutional majority, I hereby declare it passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 534 by Chairman Howell and others relative to school violence.
Chairman Howell, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 534 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Howell moves passage, probably seconded. Mr. Clerk, any amendments been filed?
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Chairman Howell, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this bill came to me from the Safety Committee of the Bradley County Sheriff's Department. The amendment or the bill will amend the TCA code to allow a judge or a court to hold a juvenile for psychological evaluation when it is determined that that juvenile has made a credible threat of mass violence against their school or fellow students. With that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Chairman Howell renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for the bill. Just a question. Will there be any sort of further evaluation of that student or notification to others that they could be at risk to others?
Chairman Howell.
Thank you for that question. I believe the purpose of the bill and the reason the committee brought it to me is so that they could be evaluated, the student could be evaluated to see if they are a threat to themselves as well as a threat to the student and the school. And if they are indeed a threat, then it would be treated like any other credible threat of violence.
Representative Powell.
Thank you for that explanation.
Any further discussion? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 534, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Cheryl, aye. Ramsey, aye. Todd, aye. Powers, aye. Beck, aye. Ms. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 91, no nays.
House Bill 534, having received the constitutional majority, I hereby declare it passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 540 by Chairman Powers and others relative to directional signs for public community colleges. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Chairman Powers, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 427.
Chairman Powers moves to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 427, properly second without objection. So ordered. Chairman Powers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 427 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Powers moves passage of Senate Bill 427 on third and final consideration, properly second. Mr. Clerk, call the first amendment.
House Transportation Committee Amendment Number 1. Mr. Speaker, it's similar to Senate Amendment Number 1.
Chairman Howell, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move to withdraw.
Without objection, Amendment Number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
House Finance Ways and Means Committee Amendment Number 1 filed as House Amendment 2. Mr. Speaker, it's the same as Senate Amendment Number 1.
Chair Lady Hazelwood, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Since it is the same as Senate Amendment Number 1, we move to withdraw.
Without objection, Amendment Number 2 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Powers, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 540 removes the minimum enrollment requirement for a community college of 1,000 students to be considered for interstate signage. This puts our community colleges on a level playing field with the TCATch, which have no minimum requirement. Current statute and TBR allow a community college to have to be within 19 miles of an interstate and interchange, and this bill will still provide signage for any community colleges or TBRs within that 19-mile radius. And this particular bill, we only had one within my particular Rome State Community College area, so it provides signage for that particular bill. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Chairman Powers renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 427, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member cast their vote? Does any member wish to change their vote? Becca. Mr. Clerk, take the vote, please.
Ayes 92, no nays.
Senate Bill 427, having received the constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 881 by Chairman Terry and others relative to rioting. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Chairman Terry, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 0451.
Chairman Terry moves to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 451, properly second without objection. So ordered. Chairman Terry, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 451 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Terry moves passage of Senate Bill 451 on third and final consideration, properly second. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment Number 1. Mr. Speaker, same as Senate Amendment Number 1.
Chairman Kershaw, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment Number 1 is in the Senate bill. Move to withdraw.
Without objection, Amendment Number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Terry, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill expands the offense of aggravated rioting to include rioting by a person who travels from outside the state with intent to commit a criminal offense, or those that are participating in a riot in exchange for compensation. It also increases the mandatory minimum sentence for aggravated rioting to 60 days if the person commits more than one aggravating circumstance. I renew my motion.
Chairman Terry renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Chairman Terry, what's the definition of rioting in this part of the code?
Chairman Terry.
Thank you for that question. Rioting means a disturbance in a public place or penal institution as defined in 39-16-601 involving the assemblage of three or more persons, whether or not participating in any otherwise lawful activity which by tumultuous and violent conduct creates grave danger of substantial damage to property or serious bodily injury to persons or substantially obstructs law enforcement or other governmental function.
Representative Clemens.
Thank you, Chairman Terry. And so if someone is present when that is taking place, but they are not participating in the violent action or destructive action, does their mere presence expose them to this?
Chairman Terry.
Thank you for that question. This is talking about those that are paid to riot or those that have come in from out of state with an intent to create a criminal offense. What this bill is actually trying to do is to protect those Tennesseans that are peacefully there to protest. It's based on something called social contagion theory. Basically, when somebody does an act or two or more people start doing an act, it becomes contagious. And so if you have someone there that's peacefully protesting, then all of a sudden they get caught up in the moment, then they may end up with a charge of rioting or potentially aggravated rioting. What we're trying to do is prevent that.
Representative Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And so, just so I'm clear, and for the record, I can't. Hey, pal, sit down. Chairman, so do they have the intent? They have to have the intent to come to the state for the purpose of rioting under this bill? Is that your intent of this legislation?
Chairman Terry.
Thank you. They have to have an intent to create a criminal offense. So, for instance, if they came in with the intent, they brought a Louisville Slugger, and they break something up with that, and it's known that they brought that in, that could be considered intent to create a criminal offense.
Representative Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, sponsor.
Chairman Dixie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm just curious, how are you going to prove intent with this, that someone came from out of town to do this?
Chairman Terry.
Thank you. Obviously, if, say, intent, obviously we have our DAs and the prosecutors and those that may look into this issue. You could look on social media. I mean, it's out there. Obviously, finding that intent is going to be on the prosecutors for that. But, you know, there's people out there on social media, I'm going to go to this state, I'm going to do this, potentially things like that.
Chairman Dixie.
So let's take this scenario. Things in life happens fast, right? So if something happened, a historical event or some sort of tragedy happened immediately, I'm just in town visiting my cousin and we go downtown to protest. Am I still considered, how do you prove that I'm not from out of town to come to protest?
Chairman Terry.
Thank you. This would be someone that comes in from out of state, so not just from out of town, from out of state. I will tell you that, for instance, in the event that happened in Kenosha, Wisconsin, those that they arrested for the rioting, I think there were 175 some odd that got arrested. They were able to prove that 102 of those individuals were from out of state.
Chairman Dixie.
So my concern is that if someone were to get arrested and they had an out-of-state ID, they would fall under this law, and you could possibly be penalized just because it could be a college student that's from out of state that goes down to protest, peacefully protest, but they get caught up in this, and then they're going to get an e-felony that's going to be with them for the rest of their lives just because they were down there to peacefully protest and they had an out-of-state ID. And that concerns me very much with this bill.
Chairman Terry.
I appreciate the concerns. Obviously, you'd have to prove that they had the intent to create a criminal offense or that they were compensated for that. And again, that's another bar.
Chairman Dixie. And then the other thing, when it says prove that they were compensated, I think that's a really high bar, and I have no idea how someone could prove that I was compensated for that. I couldn't see myself giving someone else money. How could you prove that someone else was compensated for this? I think that this bill is a little flawed, and we may want to come back to the drawing board on this one a little bit.
Chairman Terry, anything to add? No, sir. All right.
Thank you for the comment.
Representative Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sponsor yield. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You mentioned in your statements Mr. Speaker,
Yes, sir.
I can't hear myself ask the questions with. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Chairman, you mentioned in your statements that the purpose behind this bill is to protect peaceful protesters. How do you justify that's the purpose behind this bill?
Chairman Terry.
Thank you. And like I said before, it's based on the theory of social contagion theory. We want people to be able to protest and exercise their ability to peacefully protest. If you have somebody there that's paid to escalate something, then what you have is you have people that are there exercising their peaceful rights, and then all of a sudden you have somebody that escalates that, starts throwing a rock, starts doing something, and the motions get going. I'll explain, like from social contagion theory, that happens here oftentimes on the House floor. You've seen that before when people are up here and they've got a bill, and then all of a sudden somebody comes and they start signing on to the bill, and then all of a sudden the next person says, okay, I'm going to sign. And so it's something that occurs. And so what we're trying to do is protect those individuals.
Representative Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So would it be the responsibility of law enforcement to determine in a peaceful protesting setting, would it be up to law enforcement to determine who is the rioters and who are not the rioters?
Chairman Terry.
That's correct.
Representative Miller.
Would it be up to law enforcement to determine who is a resident of Tennessee, who's not a resident of Tennessee?
Chairman Terry.
That's what they would do, yes.
Representative Miller.
Law enforcement would determine that in a actual setting of a peaceful protesting? What would they do? Ask for your identification at that moment?
Chairman Terry.
Thank you. I'm not sure I understand. If in the event there's a riot and they arrest individuals, obviously when they're processing those individuals, they would know where they came from, and then as part of their investigation, that's what they would look into.
Representative Miller.
So based on unintended consequences, and as you say, an escalation, peaceful rioters could be, or peaceful protesters could be arrested along with potential rioters at that time. In other words, everybody could be arrested at the moment.
Chairman Terry.
This bill doesn't speak to that. I think that when they would arrest individuals, they would arrest whoever they felt like was committing a crime at the time. That would be on them at that time. If they see somebody just walking, they're probably not going to arrest that individual. If they see someone, throwing something into a building or jumping on a car, something like that, that's where they would arrest somebody.
Representative Miller.
Yes, but I think again that if we look at the unintended consequences, for an example, if we were to consider, let's say, the insurrection that happened in D.C., if that were to have happened at this Capitol, and this bill was law, and keep in mind, you had thousands of individuals that were at the Capitol. There was a riot. If you had a similar situation here, would everybody in that vicinity at that riot, although many of them were not rioting, they may have just been peacefully protesting? What would have happened under this law if that were to happen in this Capitol?
Chairman Terry.
Those that were not rioting in that would not be charged with rioting. Those that were rioting would be arrested and processed.
Representative Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, sponsor.
Representative Mitchell.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. So, Representative Terry, I'm trying to figure out, in the code we already have 39-17-304 inciting a riot. So what is the need for this on top of we've already got this as a crime?
Chairman Terry.
Thank you. Great question. It's the intent. You know, if you are paid to incite the riot, this adds to that.
Representative Mitchell.
Okay, so I get that. So I'm just trying to make sure will your bill work both ways? Let's say we know people are coming into state. How about if people sit around on their social media for a few weeks prior to an event and then they travel out of state and say disrupt our United States Capitol? What if we've got all those? Would this still be a crime in Tennessee? Because the intent formulated in Tennessee. So would your bill address those people who, the insurrectionists?
Chairman Terry.
Thank you. That's a crime that's committed outside the state, and that there's probably another process for that, but that's not what this bill addresses.
Representative Mitchell.
But would the elements of your crime, the intent, which is the main, you said was the main difference between what's already on the books and what you're adding, the intent is formulated so the crime of that part of the crime is committed within the state. Don't you think that's just as equal need that we need to correct that as what you're trying to address here today? Can't we kill two birds with one stone with your bill?
Chairman Terry.
Thank you. Great question, and it sounds like that's probably something that you could have drafted and run, and seems like it probably may get some support.
Representative Mitchell.
Well, I thought you were just trying to take care of all the situation, but sounds like a one-way street. But thank you for answering my questions.
Representative Holsey.
Call for previous question, please.
Previous question has been called. Any objection to the previous question? There's objection. We are voting on previous question. All those in favor vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change vote? Sexton, aye. Wright, aye. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Aye, 70, 23 nays.
Senate Bill 451 having received the constitutional majority, I hereby declare. Sorry, that was previous question. We're voting on the bill. We're trying to get there. Sorry. All those in favor of Senate Bill 451 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member cast their vote? Does any member wish to change their vote? Ms. Clerk, please take the vote.
Aye, 73, 20 nays.
Senate Bill 451 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 442 by Chairman Vaughn and others relative to the Major Trevor Joseph Act. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Chairman Vaughn, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 0793.
Chairman Vaughn moves to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 793 without objection. So ordered. Chairman Vaughn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I now move passage of Senate Bill 793 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Vaughn moves passage of Senate Bill 793 on third and final consideration. Popular second. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Chairman Vaughn, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, y'all gonna have to bear with me. I enjoy having a good time, and I enjoy performing, but sometimes when I'm sincere, I struggle. Trevor Joseph was a resident of the District of Champions, District 95. He was, at the time of his death, he was the commander of the Cajun Dust-Off, which is a medevac unit in Fort Polk, Louisiana. He was an exceptional leader, a courageous aviator. He was a Tennessee volunteer who was always proud to go above and beyond for his soldiers and never hesitated at any mission, no matter the cost. Over his 11-year career, Major Joseph deployed twice to Afghanistan, 2010, 2017. He was awarded multiple honors, including the Bronze Star, the Meritorious Service Medal, Air Medal with Valor in Combat, 2 Army Commendation Medals, Army Achievement Medal, Parachutist Badge, Combat Action Badge, Senior Aviator Badge, and he was also one of 4 soldiers who was awarded the Rescue of the Year for bravery and courage shown during a medevac rescue in Afghanistan in 2016. He died in a helicopter accident at Fort Polk, Louisiana, late September 2019. When I got the call, I'll never will forget, I was at Landers GMC in South Haven, Mississippi, getting warranty work done. And a funeral home director called me, same guy that buried my parents, and said, hey, I need some help. Said, you've lost one of your soldiers from your district, and said, due to his age and the men that he commanded and them being in Louisiana, said, we'd like to be able to set the funeral for Saturday, the upcoming Saturday. And I said, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. The District of Champions doesn't require much from me in constituent service. Here is a chance for me to deliver a very important role. And so I made a call, and the call I made to Veterans Affairs at the state of Tennessee was very disappointing. I was told that there were processes, that we only buried people Monday through Friday from 8 to 5. And I said, well, is there any commissioner discretion? Well, we don't know. So after a long time of maybes, we don't know, finally the family had to set the date for the funeral, and he wound up being buried at 11 o'clock on a mundane Tuesday when soldiers had to burn leave where people, his high school friends, couldn't come by to pay respects. And so whenever I found this out, my good friend, Representative Moon and Representative Whitson, we started looking into it, and we didn't get much satisfaction over what occurred. So that day, I made a decision that, you know what, I have 98 friends that will help me get this right. And so with that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Chairman Vaughn renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 793, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member cast their vote? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 93, no nays.
Senate Bill 793, having received the constitutional majority, I hereby declare it passed. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1276 by Representative Griffey and others, relative to the Tennessee Election Integrity Act. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Representative Griffey, you are recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 1315.
Representative Griffey moves to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 1315, properly second with objection. So ordered. Representative Griffey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for passage of Senate Bill 1315 on third and final consideration.
Representative Griffey moves passage of Senate Bill 1315 on third and final consideration, properly second. Mr. Clerk, call it First Amendment.
House Local Government Committee Amendment number 1, Mr. Speaker, same as Senate Amendment number 1.
Chairman Crawford, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Griffey, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speakers. Members, what Senate Bill 1315 does, it adds an additional security provision for paper absentee ballots. It would add a watermark This is provided there's 5 vendors in Tennessee that provide these paper ballots to our local election commissions. They can all do this, so I renew my motion.
Representative Griffey renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Representative. Democrats are for secure elections. Let me say that again. Contrary to the messaging that goes out from whoever sends it out, Democrats are for secure elections. This is a good bill. This is a very good bill, and I want to thank you for bringing it. And I'm going to be voting for it. I do have a question, though. Is there anything in this bill that would say something to those actors, the election commissions possibly, that send out ballots without the watermark on it after we pass this bill?
Representative Griffey.
Thank you for the question. What this would do is the local administrators have to send a ballot to the state election commissions for approval. They approve it. They will have to have their watermark provisions on that. The state will give them permission to print those ballots. The watermark will not be disclosed to the public as far as what's put out in the paper for the sample ballot. That will remain confidential with the local administrators. So that's the process as explained to me.
Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Mr. Sponsor. And it's a good process. But again, is there anything that would hold election commissions accountable for sending out the wrong ballot to voters, which in turn could possibly put them in a time constraint or create an issue? You know, this is a good bill, and I hope that there's something in here, or maybe there's something in the code already, that would hold election commissions accountable if they send out the wrong stuff.
Representative Griffey.
Thank you very much. This bill doesn't specifically address anything regarding that. I think our local commission, just by assumption, would be under the same provisions that are required that they send out the appropriate ballot. If they don't send out the appropriate ballot, whether it's a watermark or misprinting or something like that, that could be addressed by the local election commission or the state election commission.
Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Sponsor. Again, Democrats are for election security. Don't get it twisted. This is a good bill. Appreciate it. I'll be voting for it.
Representative Sapicki.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to make sure this is a roll call vote, if you don't mind.
Representative Towns.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sponsor Yield.
I do.
Mr. Sponsor, tell me what happens with the ballots that currently are in these election commissions across the state. Are we going to be able, because I know there's a cost involved, are we going to be able to put a watermark on these ballots so they don't have to just, discard them?
Representative Griffey.
It's my understanding we're talking about simply paper, and some paper may have watermarks on it, some may not. Going forward, they'll have to use paper that will have the security on it. If some local election commissions already have paper, then they'll probably not be able to use that for these absentee ballots.
Representative Towns.
So the effective date of usage is when? Is it this year, next year?
Representative Griffey.
It's my understanding effective date will be this July.
Representative Towns.
This July. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Hardaway.
Thank you, Speaker. To the sponsor, on the fiscal responsibility, will that be on the locals, or will the state provide the reimburse or provide the monies for the watermark ballots?
Representative Griffey.
It's my understanding this is a cost that the locals bear already, and they would just have to use paper with their added watermark security provision.
Representative Hardaway.
All right. So what I'm concerned about are the inventory of is the inventory that the local or the county election commissions may already have that would be waste. So is there any way that we being the state, can bear the cost of reimbursing them for those ballots in inventory or that paper in inventory that they may have?
Representative Griffey.
It's my understanding the cost or the loss of waste of that would be minimal. If they can't use the paper for actual absentee ballots, depending on the size of the paper, they might be able to use it for office work or some other use within the election commission or the county.
Representative Griffey.
It's also my understanding it's about $105 per local election commission.
Representative Hardaway.
Okay, the 105 is the cost that that has been identified as the only cost there will be to the local election commissions because of this bill, correct?
Representative Griffey.
That's my understanding.
Representative Hardaway.
Thank you, Speaker. Thank you, sponsor.
Representative Moon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Sponsor, all Tennesseans desire secure elections. Thank you for a very well thought out, very researched piece of legislation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Griffey.
Well, this is a brilliant idea. I just wish I'd have thought of it myself. So I want to thank the Speaker for this excellent idea. Thank him for allowing me to pursue this.
Thank you. Representative Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sponsor yield.
Yes.
Representative, have you heard of the term ballot harvesting?
Representative Griffey.
I've heard of that term, yes.
Representative Miller.
Is this bill to prevent that ballot harvesting?
Representative Griffey.
I think this bill is just an attempt to make sure that the absentee paper ballots that go out have an additional security measure.
Representative Miller.
So nothing in this bill has to do with voter suppression whatsoever?
Representative Griffey.
Absolutely not.
Representative Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, sponsor.
Representative Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sponsor, I have one question with regard to Section 5, TCA 26304C. You're adding language in there, any absentee ballot without the approved watermark must be rejected unless the ballot was authorized by state or federal law to be delivered electronically. Are those ballots that are delivered electronically going to be distinctive by appearance to someone reviewing the ballots so that they will know whether or not it was delivered electronically or in person or via mail?
Representative Griffey.
Thank you, Representative, for that question. It's my understanding electronic absentee ballots generally go out to our military, and those are tracked and separately and counted separately as they come in. So this wouldn't really impact that.
Representative Clemens.
Okay, I just know that we rely heavily on volunteers and the training that's required of these volunteers. While diligent and best efforts are made, I just want to ensure that those are distinct so that, when we're writing rejected across the front of these ballots, we're not confusing electronically delivered versus mail or personally delivered. So just wanted to address that and get this answer on the record.
Representative Griffey.
It is my understanding those are sent out separately, tracked separately, and counted separately by the local election commission.
Representative Clemens.
But when they come in, is there a separate part of the code that specifically addresses those? If they come in separately, are they not going? What's the process going to be? Just because they come in separately doesn't mean they can't be commingled at some point. Or I don't know what the code says about that. If you could address that.
Representative Griffey.
This bill simply addresses the non-electronic absentee ballots. These are for the paper absentee ballots that are sent out by the local election administration. This bill does not impact how the electronic absentee ballots are sent out or brought back and counted.
Representative Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, sponsor. And from what I gather from your answer, it's not your intent for there to be any commingling of these, there to be clearly distinct, no interruption, so that we're not marking some military ballots rejected or others that are electronically delivered. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none, all those in favor of Senate Bill 1315 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 92, one nay.
Senate Bill 1315, having received the constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 322 by Representative Hodges and others relative to discounts at state parks for veterans with service-connected disabilities.
Representative Hodges, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 322 on third and final consideration.
Representative Hodges moves passage, properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House Agriculture and Natural Resources Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Halford, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Amendment number 1 rewrites the bill and move to adopt and defer to the sponsor for explanation.
Chairman Halford moves adoption of amendment number 1, properly seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor of adopting amendment number 1 say aye, aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
House Local Government Committee Amendment number 1 filed as House Amendment 2.
Chairman Reagan, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment adds rule promulgating language to the bill in order to effectuate the act. Move to adopt.
Chairman Reagan moves adoption of amendment number 2, properly seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor of amendment number 2 say aye, aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Hodges.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I renew my motion.
Representative Hodges renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 322 as amended vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, Littleton, aye. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 92, no nays.
House Bill 322, having received the constitutional majority, I hereby declare it passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 455 by Representative Thompson and others relative to psychology. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Representative Thompson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 161.
Representative Thompson moves to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 161, properly seconded without objection. So ordered. Representative Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 161 on third and final consideration.
Representative Thompson moves passage of Senate Bill 161 on third and final consideration, properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, call it First Amendment.
House Government Operations Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Reagan, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment adds the compact to the sunset cycle and sets a sunset date for June 30th, 2023. Move to adopt.
Chairman Reagan moves adoption of House Amendment number 1, properly seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor of adoption of House Amendment number 1 say aye, aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Thompson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is a bill to include Tennessee in the Psychology Interjurisdictional Compact, or PsyPact. There are currently 15 states in this. 2 others will be members in the next couple of months, and then 14 additional states have pending legislation. This was a bill to increase public access to professional psychological services and enhance the profession overall. And that's why it has the strong support of the Tennessee Psychology Association. And with that, I renew my motion.
Representative Thompson renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 161 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member cast their vote? Does any member wish to change their vote? Wright, aye. Crawford, aye. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 91, no nays.
Senate Bill 161 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1497 by Representative Towns relative to display operators. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Representative Towns, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move to substitute the form to Senate Bill 263.
Representative Towns moves to substitute form to Senate Bill 263 without objection. So ordered. Representative Towns.
Here again, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion on third and final consideration on Senate Bill 263.
Representative Towns moves passage of Senate Bill 263 on third and final consideration. Properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, call the First Amendment.
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Representative Towns, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, what this bill simply does is make the use of pyrotechnics a lot safer when we're having public events. Obviously, if you look around the country, there have been some incidents that have actually caused great damage to citizens. I can go as far back as the first one I remember is really when an entertainer, Michael Jackson, was coming down with the Pepsi commercial. That pyrotechnic went off and gave him a really bad burn. There's another one in Nashville some years ago that actually burned somebody as well. So what this is seeking to do, and this is coming from the industry itself, for outdoor firework displays, operator applicants, the applicant must show that the applicant has worked under a competent supervision of at least 3 outdoor firework displays in the last 3 years immediately upon proceeding with the application. Secondly, for approximate pyrotechnic display operator applicant, that applicant must show that they have worked under competent supervision for at least 5 approximate pyrotechnic displays within 3 years. And thirdly, for a flame effect display operator, that applicant must show that they worked under competent supervision at least 5 flame effect displays within the last 3 years. And finally, the only thing else that modifies once all those changes have taken place, the certificate as we speak today is for 2 years. This will extend their certificate for 3 years. And Mr. Speaker and members, that explains what the bill does.
Do you renew your motion, sir?
I do renew my motion.
Representative Towns renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Chairman Dixie, you're recognized.
This to the sponsor. Is this your first bill?
Representative Towns.
It actually is my first 100th bill, and a junior member probably would not understand that.
Chairman Dixie.
Thank you. Hey, as Leader Lambert said, I just want to let you know that I love you.
Representative Towns.
If that's the case, prove it by putting me in your will.
Any further discussion? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 263 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member cast their vote? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 87, no nays.
Senate Bill 263 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare it passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1540 by Representative Weaver relative to public pensions and retirement benefits. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Representative Weaver, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 1520.
Representative Weaver moves to substitute and conform Senate Bill 1520, probably second without objection. So ordered. Representative Weaver.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 1520 on third and final consideration.
Representative Weaver moves passage of Senate Bill 1520 on third and final consideration. Probably seconded. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House State Government Committee Amendment number 1, Mr. Speaker, same as Senate Amendment number 1.
Chairman Kiesling, you are recognized.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Amendment is the same. This amendment is the same as the Senate amendment. We move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Weaver, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill, or Senate Bill 1520, creates a pathway to allow members of the Tennessee Consolidated Retirement System to transfer the funds invested in a pension system when the employee changes government employment. So the money follows the employee. That's what the bill does. I move passage.
Representative Weaver renews her motion. Any discussion on the bill? Chairman Keesling.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Quickly, sponsor, this doesn't, if you move from state to county, that's not included, though. That wouldn't, that's not applicable, is it? When you did mention the word government.
Chair Lady Weaver.
Correct.
Chairman Keesling.
And that correct means yes, that it would. Okay, thanks. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Any further discussion? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 1520 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member cast their vote? Does any member wish to change their vote? Alexander, aye. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 88, no nays.
Senate Bill 1520, and received the constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 39 by Representative Freeman and others relative to sexual offenses. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Representative Freeman, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 1035.
Representative Freeman moves to substitute and conform Senate Bill 1035, probably seconded without objection. So ordered. Representative Freeman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 1035 on third and final consideration.
Representative Freeman moves passage of Senate Bill 1035 on third and final consideration, probably seconded. Mr. Clerk, call it First Amendment.
House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Curcio, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment number 1 is similar to the Senate amendment, but the committee amendment shortens the time period with which a law enforcement agency must submit a sexual assault evidence collection kit to the TBI or similar qualified laboratory, and other changes. With that explanation, Mr. Speaker, I move adoption of House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Curcio moves adoption of House Amendment number 1, probably seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor of adopting House Amendment number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Freeman, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 39, Senate Bill 1035 intends to give a little bit of control back to survivors of rape and sexual abuse. This creates a tracking system whereby survivors of rape and sexual abuse can see where their kit is in the process. It allows for the process to be more responsive, reliable, consistent. The system can be set up to notify various stakeholders where the kit is in process to make sure that they can properly advocate for themselves. One of the other items that was in the amendment that we just picked up extended the period for which hold kits are retained by law enforcement. The young lady that brought this bill and spoke over and over again in committee and worked tirelessly to ensure support will benefit from that extension from 3 to 10 years. And I can't overstate how important this legislation is going to be for survivors of rape and sexual abuse in Tennessee. And I could not be more proud to stand up here and present this to all of you. And with that, I renew my motion.
Representative Freeman renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Chairman Curcio.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Mr. Sponsor. I just wanted to, number one, thank you for bringing this. First bit, Section 1 names this the Jim Coley Protection for Rape Survivors Act. Many of us worked with Jim in this chamber and know the work that he did for years, and I want to thank you for picking up kind of right where he left off. I think this is a great example of how when we work together in a bipartisan fashion, we can truly get something done for Tennessee that is going to make a lasting impact. So no matter where you go or the rest of us go after we leave here, this will be a permanent marker left on the state of Tennessee to the good. And I want to thank you for that. Thank you for representing your district so well.
Representative Freeman, anything to add? No, sir. Any further discussion? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 1035 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member casts their votes, any member wish to change their vote? Ms. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 89, no nays.
Senate Bill 1035 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1437 by Chairman Hicks of Hawkins, relative to sports facilities.
Chairman Hicks, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 1437 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Hicks moves passage, properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House Finance Ways and Means Committee Amendment number 1.
Chair Lady Hazelwood, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment rewrites the bill. I move adoption of the amendment, and I defer to the sponsor for an explanation.
Chair Lady Hazelwood moves adoption of amendment number 1, probably seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Hicks, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 1437 is the result of an agreement between the administration, the Tennessee Titans, and the Metro Nashville Sports Authority, which is the owner of Nissan Stadium. The bill will allow state sales tax collections generated at the stadium to go towards renovation, upgrades, and maintenance for Nissan Stadium. With that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Chairman Hicks renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just one question I'm curious about. Why does the amendment allow for the Canadian Football League franchise?
Chairman Hicks.
Good question. This particular piece of legislation is for Nissan Stadium.
Representative Powell.
Okay, I just was going to make sure there was no Canadian football franchise that we were trying to get here in Nashville, Tennessee. But, thank you for the question.
Representative Hardaway.
Thank you, Speaker. To the sponsor, does this impact Shelby County, any of the tourism development zones, or the Grizzlies?
Chairman Hicks.
No, sir, it does not. This is simply for Nissan Stadium.
Representative Hardaway.
All right. Thank you, Speaker. Thank you, sponsor.
Any further discussion? Representative Sexton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to rise in opposition to this for two reasons. I can't appreciate my good friend, Representative Hicks, anymore, and I appreciate him. Good man, good representative, does a lot for his county. I just am particularly against this bill for two reasons. One is I don't like that we're taking taxpayer money and we're funding these kind of projects. The next issue that I have is more personal. I've always been a fan of the NFL ever since I was a little boy. But I don't like what the NFL and these other sports teams are doing to our country. Disrespecting our flag, taking a knee on the national anthem. So I have to, on those grounds, vote against this bill. And I'm going to ask you to, Republicans, until we decide that we're going to stand up against these things, we're going to continue to get what we're getting. I believe that it's time that we take a stand and we say no. I defend their right to take a knee if they want to, but I also defend my right.
Representative Sexton, can you stay on the bill, please?
With all due respect, Mr. Speaker, I am on the bill.
Representative Sexton, this is a foregone tax revenue bill, please. Chairman Hicks.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And the first thing, I guess, let me address the first question or the first idea that was thrown out there. Just to give you perspective of what this means to our state, if you look at the overall investment that the state is making, it'll be about $334 million is what will be invested. If you look at the return on that investment, it's going to be somewhere around $600 million. Folks, this is economic development is what this is. As far as the second piece of that, please understand that Tennessee Titans do not own this stadium. This is owned by the Nashville Metro Sports Authority. Plain and simple. There's actually more events that take place in this stadium outside of the Tennessee Titans than the Tennessee Titans themselves. So you can look at all the different events. I think there's actually 350 different events that take place. So please don't, while I fully respect my neighbor up in Granger County, that is simply a different issue. And so we're looking at economic development for our state.
Any further discussion? Representative Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Chairman, for your bill. I'm for economic development. And for 3 years, I've been working with the Department of Economic and Community Development to reframe Tennessee's economy and really invest into what would be more of a recession-resilient economy, looking at health and life sciences, looking at biotech. And what we're seeing is a lot of tax breaks, a lot of tax structure benefits that incentivize more and more low to mid wage jobs, working in vending, working in fast food. And there's an instance right now in Southeast Tennessee. For 2 years now, we've asked for money from this state for economic and community development. There would be about 70 to 80 jobs created. The average salary would be $74,000 to $100,000. And yet, those requests don't fit a bucket. And so I'm going to vote for your bill, and I'm going to vote for Chairman Zachary's bill that's next because I believe in economic development. But I'm asking those that are listening now to be committed to something more than retail. We saw what happened to the sports authorities, and we saw what happened with some of these jobs when COVID hit. They shut down. We need an economy that's invested in PhDs, in health and life science, biotech. And it's time to do more than just pay lip service. And so I'll be supporting your bill because I'm not going to vote against the best interests of our states. But I think we can be more than narrow-minded and look at an equal economic and community development approach that invests in a recession-resilient approach and include health and life sciences. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Chairman Vaughn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and Chairman Hicks. If this bill is approved, will it increase the chances of the Titans getting a formidable defensive pass rusher on that side of the ball?
Off topic.
Oh.
Representative Garrett.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Chairman Hicks, I've just got, a clarifying question. I'm just kind of reading through the bill, and what struck me is the 130 acres around the Titans Stadium, and I'm curious if that, and this may be off the bill, so I apologize if this is not part of it, but that doesn't restrict either the Sports Authority or anyone's ability to further improve or put something else on that 130 acres that's exclusive. In other words, they won't be able to develop that property around the Titans Stadium for another future stadium or something else that might fit that particular area.
Chairman Hicks.
Thank you for that question. And so just to reiterate, around that 130 acres, there will be development there, but the sales tax generated on that 130 acres will go back towards the renovation, the upgrades, and the maintenance for Nissan Stadium. So that's where the foregone revenue, if you look at the fiscal note, that's where that comes in. Currently, there's no revenue being generated, so that's the foregone revenue.
Representative Garrett.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for clarifying that. Appreciate it.
Representative Hardaway.
Thank you, Speaker. I had a couple of my questions addressed earlier, so I'm just going to take this opportunity to amen what Representative Smith just said about bills such as this, that we look at how we diversify our economy so that it is sustainable through the different economic cycles. I'd say that a critical part of that is Tennessee adopting a living wage. But thank you for the bill.
Representative Hardaway, you're off subject. Any further discussion? Representative Mitchell.
Yeah, and thank you, Representative Hicks. Appreciate you carrying this bill. We'll give you an honorary Davidson County delegation title today. But I appreciate all your hard work on this bill. Thank you.
Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move previous question.
Previous question's been called. Any objection? Seeing none, we are voting. All those in favor of House Bill 1437 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 75, 10 nays, 4 present, not voting.
House Bill 1437 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 488 by Chairman Williams, relative to telecommunications.
Chairman Williams, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage on third and final consideration of House Bill 488.
Chairman Williams moves passage, probably seconded. Mr. Clerk, call the First Amendment.
House State Government Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Kiesling, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The amendment does rewrite the bill, and we'll defer to the sponsor for further explanation, but we do move to adopt. Thank you.
Chairman Kiesling moves adoption amendment number 1, probably second. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Williams, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this bill as amended would allow for surplus radios to be distributed to distressed counties first. The budget that you'll hear later in the week includes new radios for law enforcement. This would allow us to, through the surplus property process, to be able to distribute those surplus radios to your communities. With that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Chairman Williams renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 488 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 90, no nays.
House Bill 488 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1204 by Chairman Zachary and others, relative to sales and use taxes.
Chairman Zachary, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 1204 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Zachary moves passage, properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House Finance, Ways and Means Committee Amendment number 1.
Chair Lady Hazelwood, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment does rewrite the bill. I move adoption of the amendment, and I defer to the sponsor for an explanation.
Chair Lady Hazelwood moves adoption of amendment number 1, properly seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Zachary, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this legislation establishes parameters allowing the Knox County Commission and the Knoxville City Council to move forward with a vote on the new sports and entertainment complex in East Knoxville. With that, I renew my motion.
Chairman Zachary renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Moody.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And to the sponsor, may I ask, which Major League Baseball team will be affiliated with this?
Chairman Zachary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Madam Chair, that would be the Chicago Cubs.
Representative Moody.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I must be a no due to that. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Representative Mitchell.
Representative, I missed a few minutes ago. How did you vote 2 votes ago, just to make sure?
Next question. Representative Hardaway, Leader Camper.
Thank you, Speaker. To the sponsor, I certainly support all efforts for economic development. Is there a mechanism in the bill to measure the impact of the incentives in a way that the layman can understand it?
Chairman Zachary.
And Representative Hardaway, can you say that last part again? I didn't understand the last part.
Representative Hardaway.
Just metrics that the layman, John Doe, Joan Doe, the typical taxpayer can look at it and say this is doing what it was supposed to do or not doing what it was supposed to do.
Chairman Zachary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for the question. So the way this language is drafted, the sports authority that is owned by Knox County and the city of Knoxville, they will manage the stadium. This stadium that's within the sports and entertainment complex is owned by the community. And so we'll have roughly 200 to 300 events. The anchor tenant will be the Knoxville Smokies. They'll pay roughly a $1 million annual lease to the Sports Authority. Then all the revenue generated from within the stadium for all the events stays with the stadium, stays with the Sports Authority. And the legislation, the language is very clear that all of that revenue has to go to pay off the debt. So the tax revenue generated from the stadium for all events, which we have a memorandum of understanding for a soccer team that's going to be coming to Knoxville, all of that will stay with the Sports Authority, and the legislation is very clear that all has to be used for the debt. So you will be able to gather that information because it is owned by the county and the city through the Sports Authority.
Representative Hardaway.
Thank you, Speaker, and thank you, sponsor. That doesn't get to my concerns, but I support the right for those local folks to make their local decisions on how they're going to allocate their tax dollars or how they will allocate the tax incentive programs. But I'll look to speak to you offline on this.
Chairman Zachary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this area of Knox County where the sports and entertainment complex will go, many of you are familiar with this area if you're traveling east through Knox County, through the city of Knoxville. It's the area on the right, just past the AT&T building, past Regas, where you get off at James White Parkway. Currently, that is a blighted area. There is no revenue, no tax base, no jobs in that area currently. That area borders public housing. So with this new sports and entertainment development that will go in, the legislation includes $100 million of private development. This is unique than any other legislation that we've ever passed, where the owner of the Smokies is guaranteeing $100 million in private development around that stadium that will create those 3,000 jobs and have a tremendous economic impact in a blighted area that has looked that way since the 70s. So this is a significant move forward for the East Knoxville community, and it will do for East Knoxville what Westtown Mall and Turkey Creek have done for West Knoxville. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I'll be glad to answer any further questions.
Any further discussion? Representative Clemens.
Yeah, just because I never get a chance to do this on the record on the House floor, I just want to say go Cubs. And to you Cardinals fans, just go home. Thanks.
Out of order. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 1204 as amended vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote. Mr. Clerk.
Aye 71, 10 nay, 8 present, not voting.
House Bill 1204 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
Senate Joint Resolution 2 by Representative Todd and others. A resolution to propose an amendment to Article 11 of the Constitution of Tennessee relative to the right to work.
Chairman Todd, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I request the clerk read SJR for its second reading.
Mr. Clerk, please read the resolution.
Mr. Speaker, Senate Joint Resolution 2 on the second reading. A resolution to propose an amendment to Article 11 of the Constitution of Tennessee relative to the right to work, whereas Senate Joint Resolution number 648 of the 111th General Assembly, known as the, quote, Right to Work Amendment, end quote, which proposed amendment to Article 11 of the Constitution of Tennessee relative to the right to work, was considered and agreed upon by a majority of all the members elected to each of the two houses, as shown by the yeas and nays entered on their journals, and whereas such resolution proposing such amendment was published in accordance with Article 11, Section 3 of the Constitution of Tennessee, and whereas protecting the right of Tennesseans to join or refuse to join a labor union or employee organization is a fundamental civil right, and whereas this right to work has played a crucial role in Tennessee's thriving economy, now therefore be it resolved by the Senate of the 112th General Assembly of the State of Tennessee, the House of Representatives concurring, that a two-thirds majority of all the members of each House concurring, as shown by the yeas and nays entered on their journals, that it is proposed that Article 11 of the Constitution of Tennessee be amended by adding the following language as a new section. It is unlawful for any person, corporation, association, or this state or its political subdivisions to deny or attempt to deny employment to any person by reason of the person's membership in, affiliation with, resignation from, or refusal to join or affiliate with any labor union or employee organization. Be it further resolved that in accordance with Article 11, Section 3 of the Constitution of Tennessee, the foregoing proposed amendment shall be submitted to the people at the next general election in which a governor is to be chosen, the same being the 2022 November general election. And the Secretary of State is directed to place such proposed amendment on the ballot for that election. Be it further resolved that the clerk of the Senate is directed to deliver copies of this resolution to the Secretary of State, with this final resolving clause being deleted from such copies.
Chairman Todd, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that SJR 2 be set for its third and final reading on Thursday, April 29, 2021.
Without objection, so ordered. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 37 by Representative Ogles and others relative to the right to work. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Representative Ogles, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to SB 1573.
Representative Ogles moves to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 1573. Property second. Without objection, so ordered. Representative Ogles.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 1573 on the third and final consideration.
Representative Ogles moves passage of Senate Bill 1573 on third and final consideration. Property second. Mr. Clerk, call it First Amendment.
House State Government Committee Amendment number 1. Mr. Speaker, same as Senate Amendment number 1.
Chairman Kiesling, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Amendment 1 is the same as the Senate amendment. We move to withdraw.
Without objection, Amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Ogles, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this bill was brought to me by many of my constituents that live just due south of the metropolitan area, which is Nashville and northern Williamson County. And I'd like to read the whereas clauses, if you may. Whereas it is public policy in this state that there must not be two classifications of citizens in this state, those deemed essential workers and those deemed non-essential workers. And whereas it is public policy in the state that each person has the right to work, that each job in this state is essential to the well-being of the state citizenry and the economy of this state. And that wasn't written by me, but that was well articulated by somebody much smarter than me. And members, what this bill does, it prohibits local governments, local boards and authorities from generating lists of trades, jobs, and modifying those jobs in many ways and listing them as non-essential. I believe if you've got a license to work or you're doing what you should be doing and it's lawful in this state, you should have the ability to work in this state. This does not preclude in the state of emergency from the governor and the state from issuing such an order, but it does prohibit local authorities from keeping our citizens from working. And that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Representative Ogles renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Leader Lamberth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And one, welcome back. We're glad you're here, and I know you've gone through some difficult times in the last few weeks yourself. But to the sponsor, I will say that the timing is impeccable because the governor had just announced the lifting of virtually every COVID-19 restriction throughout the state. And so and that included this, any mask issues, any business restrictions, any of that, and specifically ordered and requests that the big 6 counties remove any remaining mask mandates and business restrictions before Memorial Day weekend. The reason I bring that up as part of your bill is we've gone through absolute hell as a country and as a state over the past year. We've pulled together and we've really, I think, leveraged the resources of the greatest nation that's ever existed to combat this pandemic, and we are winning. And so we never want to go back to that again. I think we've learned a lot, and I think this puts some important guardrails, especially on local decisions, on how to make sure that we never go through what we've gone through in the last year again. So thank you for the bill, but I did want to make it clear of where we stand as far as the timing of this thing. The timing of this is extraordinarily impeccable. Thank you.
Representative Ogles.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And thank you for those kind words and those comments, Leader. And thank you, Governor Bill Lee, for that timely announcement today. It's nice to have, and I know the state's ready to get back to work, and everybody's ready to start resuming their normal lives. So thank you for that very much, Governor.
Chairman Kershaw.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and again, thank you, Representative Ogles, for bringing this bill. And in light of today's events, I'm reminded of President Ronald Reagan. Representative Ogles, will you tear down this wall?
Any further discussion? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 1573 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member cast their vote? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Aye 72, 19 nays.
Senate Bill 1573, having received the constitutional majority, I hereby declare it passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1338 by Representative Ogles and others relative to burglary. Mr. Speaker, was previously considered and reset for today's regular calendar.
Representative Ogles, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 1338 on third and final consideration.
Representative Ogles moves passage. Probably seconded. Mr. Clerk, any amendments been filed?
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Representative Ogles, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And members, this bill recategorizes aggravated burglary and especially aggravated burglary as a violent crime and a crime of person rather than a property crime. Right now in the state of Tennessee, if somebody breaks into your property with a loaded gun, it is simply a property crime. And what this bill does is recategorize it as a crime against person and a violent offense for the purpose of how we collect our data, how we track things, and enters that into the state system as well as some other consequences that may have. Those are very serious offenses because of our castle doctrine and some of the other rights citizens have. Those offenses can cost you your life in this state. So they need to be treated as serious. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Representative Ogles renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 1338 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 86 nays.
House Bill 1338 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled.
Mr. Speaker, that completes the regular calendar.
Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, the House has a message calendar.
Call it first message, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 79 by Chairman Ramsey and others, relative to administrative procedure. Mr. Speaker, on April 22, 2021, the Senate substituted House Bill 79 for Senate Bill 747, adopted Amendment 1, passed House Bill 79 as amended.
Chairman Ramsey, you are recognized.
And thank you, Mr. Speaker. Essentially, this amendment clarifies judicial findings required to award cost, and I would move to concur with Senate Amendment Number 1.
Chairman Ramsey moves to concur in Senate Amendment Number 1, properly seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Amendment Number 1 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 88, no nays.
Senate Amendment Number 1, having received the constitutional majority, I hereby declare it concurred in without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Next message, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 240 by Chairman Ramsey relative to jails, local lockups. Mr. Speaker, on April 22nd, 2021, the Senate substituted House Bill 240 for Senate Bill 489, adopted Amendment 2, and passed House Bill 240 as amended.
Chairman Ramsey, you're recognized.
And thank you, Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen. The Amendment Number 2 from the Senate allows the expansion of the definition of a transition center to involve nonprofit support resources like Men of Valor and True Promises Ministries. So I would make a motion to concur in Senate Amendment Number 2.
Chairman Ramsey moves to concur in Senate Amendment Number 2, properly seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Amendment Number 2 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 89, no nays.
Senate Amendment Number 2, having received the constitutional majority, I hereby declare it concurred in without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Next message, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 368 by Chairman Williams relative to public records. Mr. Speaker, on April 21st, 2021, the Senate refused to recede in its actions in adopting Amendment 1.
Chairman Williams, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My apologies. I move to lift from the table the motion to reconsider our concurrence in Senate Amendment Number 1.
Without objection, so ordered. Chairman Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to reconsider concurrence in Senate Amendment Number 1.
Without objection, so ordered. Chairman Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Senate Amendment Number 1 simply set a sunset on the bill regarding juveniles' records. Because it was an open records, the Senate really wanted us to continue to come back and revisit this over a period of time. So this is just a sunset, Mr. Speaker and members. So I move to concur to Senate Amendment Number 1.
Chairman Williams moves to concur in Senate Amendment Number 1, probably seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Amendment Number 1 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 89, 1 nay, 1 present, not voting.
Senate Amendment Number 1, having received constitutional majority, I hereby declare concurred in without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Next message, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1016 by Chairman Hicks of Hawkins relative to pensions and retirement benefits. Mr. Speaker, on April 22nd, 2021, the Senate substituted House Bill 1016 for Senate Bill 516, adopted Amendment Number 1, and passed House Bill 1016 as amended.
Chairman Hicks, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Amendment Number 1 is a technical correction. It clarifies that the increased minimum match begins on July 1st, 2021.
Chairman Hicks moves to concur in Senate Amendment Number 1, probably seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Amendment Number 1 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 91, no nays.
Senate Amendment Number 1, having received constitutional majority, I hereby declare concurred in without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Next message, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, that completes the message calendar.
Next order of business, Mr. Clerk.
Unfinished business.
Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, we have a message from the Senate. Mr. Speaker, I'm directed to return to the House House Bill 570. The Senate refused to recede from its action in adopting Senate Amendment Number 2.
Wednesday's message calendar. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Announcements.
Announcements. Representative Brickham.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and this is for all members. In the spirit of love and fellowship, Leader Lambert is going to sponsor the Cigar Caucus tomorrow afternoon at 5 o'clock on the 8th floor of the Cordell Hull building. So please come, whether you like to smoke or not. The fellowship will be great. He's providing some fine cigars for all. Thank you.
Any further announcements? Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, today at 3 o'clock in House Hearing Room 1, Budget Appropriations Subcommittee will take up those appropriation amendments that are expected to be funded in the budget. The members are encouraged to be there to hear if yours or was funded either in part or at all. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Any further announcements? Members, before we go to the next order, just remember we have joint convention at 11 a.m. At 11 a.m. we have joint convention. Mr. Clerk. Representative Lamar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to let the Shelby County delegation, we're going to push our meeting back to 11:30 to accommodate our joint convention. So take a note on that, and we're meeting via Zoom.
Mr. Clerk, next order. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, if I could announce the schedule for the day. As the Speaker mentioned, joint convention at 11. Local Government Committee will meet at 1 in House Hearing Room 1. Criminal will meet at 1:30. Then Appropriations at 3. Finance Sub immediately following Appropriations Sub. Finance Full immediately following Finance Sub. Tomorrow, Finance Sub will meet again at 8:30 a.m. with Finance Full immediately following, with Calendar and Rules immediately following Finance Full. Then we would be back on the floor for session at 3 o'clock.
That's tomorrow. Members, just so that you know, the House and Senate have come to terms on the budget. And so there should be documents coming later today, I believe my understanding. but the budget will be in finance tomorrow morning at 8:30. So budget and finance tomorrow at 8:30. Looks like the budget will be on the floor Thursday mid-morning, maybe till lunchtime, somewhere in there, just so that you all know. Representative Parkinson?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And it's just a reminder to the members that I think there's a timeline for you to get amendments in if you're going to amend it. I'm not amending anything, Mr. Speaker. This is just information only. But those that are, don't look at me because I know who you are. You're looking like you're going to amend it, the budget. But you have to get it in at a certain time. And if you will, Mr. Speaker, have the clerk to remind them when they have to have those budget amendments in before the budget is heard. Thank you.
Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, the amendment filing deadline is 2 p.m. the day prior to a time when any bill is to be heard on the floor.
Chairman Faison.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I would remind my friend from Shelby County that there's some good stuff in this budget, and there's people on both sides of this party that want stuff in that budget. You start filing amendments, there's a good chance that we'll start filing amendments too to take stuff out. So just want to encourage you. We can have war, but I'd encourage you not to go down that road because we've worked hard, and this lady right here has busted it big time to create a great budget. So I just want to encourage y'all before you start getting smart. So I would just encourage you, don't start something you can't finish. And let's stick with our chair lady right here.
Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My name, well, kind of was called, but to my eastern counterpart, I'm not amending anything, number one. But since you've announced these great things that are in the budget, why don't you just go ahead and announce them? No, I'm pointing to you, Mr. Caucus Chair. But thank you. But that, honestly, for those new members, this is my announcement. Honestly, is not to encourage anybody to amend the budget, but I do want you to know that this is the process that we go through. This is the process that we go through, and this is the budget process. And so, as a member on the House floor, you have the right to amend it if you so want to. I'm not amending anything, but if you want to, you have the right to amend it. And we got to be honest with all the members and make sure that they understand what they can do. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Mr. Chair. And don't make any more threats, Mr. Caucus Chair over there.
Representative Mitchell. Representative Mitchell. Passes. All right. Chairman Crawford.
After that, I just want to tell everybody I love you.
Yeah. Representative Love.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and members. I want to just pause for a moment here to acknowledge that very tragic situations occurred with the death of Dr. Matthew Walker III. Matthew Walker Sr. was a prominent physician, African-American surgeon here in Nashville. As a matter of fact, performed surgery all across the country, and there's a health center named for him in the city of Nashville, the Matthew Walker Comprehensive Health Center. His grandson, Dr. Matthew Walker III, died on Saturday. He was a professor at Vanderbilt, and he worked for Merck Pharmaceuticals for 10 years, led cardiovascular ultrasound imaging, which led him to co-develop 3 blockbuster drugs, Vytorin, Januvia, and Candesartan. We want to keep in prayer the family of Dr. Matthew Walker III here in Nashville, Tennessee, as they prepare to celebrate his life. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further announcements? Members, for clarification purposes, I think a couple people have questions. With the budget being on the floor on Thursday, it is our hope to be done this week by Thursday. So if you have a hotel room that you have, you can cancel it because we know that costs you money. But anyway, our hope is to be out here on Thursday so everybody can be home on Thursday, early evening. I can't promise what time we'll be out of here starting the budget, sometime mid-morning, but our hope is not to be here on Friday. So with that, do what you need to for your Friday hotel reservation. Leader Gant.
And let me know if y'all have any.
Oh, sorry. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Roll call.
Roll call. Mr. Clerk, please take the roll.
Mr. Speaker, 91 members present.
Next order, Mr.
That
Clerk.
completes the regular order, Mr. Speaker.
Leader Gant, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the House stand in recess until 9 a.m. on Wednesday. Until 3 o'clock on Wednesday, April 28, 2021.
Without objection, the House stands in recess till 3 p.m. on Wednesday, April 28, 2021.